I'm Lindsay Williams. I'm going to be talking to you this evening about Taemin in my talk titled Black Rose, Taemin Gothic Imagery and Identity. As you can see, I've got my contact details on the front page there. You'll find me on Instagram. I'm on Blue Sky, and there's my Ko-fi link as well. All right, so I'm going to be looking at some different aspects of Gothic imagery and how Taemin uses them to reveal or perhaps conceal his identity or aspects of his identity through his art. I don't claim to be a Taemin superfan. I've been a fan for a couple of years. I'm also not a sort of mad serious scholar, but I'm just sticking together things that interest me, and hopefully they'll interest you as well. So I'm going to be looking at disguise, doubling, and transformation. So all of these come up quite often in Taemin's music videos, but also sort of album photography and other photo shoots as well. And I think they come up often enough that it's beyond a coincidence. This is intentional. So let's start with a bit of biographical information. Who is Taemin, you're asking? So Taemin, full name Lee Taemin, was born in Seoul in 1993, and he's known as the king of K-pop and the idol of idols. Basically, idol of idols just means that loads of other idols sort of list him as their influence, role model, somebody they look up to and somebody they look to for inspiration. He's obviously a singer. He's really well known for his dancing. He also choreographs his own work and for SHINee, the group that he's a member of. He writes some of his own material and collaborates in writing as well. And he's a fairly accomplished pianist. So he made his debut with SHINee in 2008. So to help you with the maths there, he was 14 at the time. SHINee is still going, still very successful. They've just had their 16th anniversary and have just finished a concert series. They've done 13 albums, 6 EPs, concert tours, live albums, you name it, really. 2014, Taemin made his solo debut. So he's been solo artist as well as a group member for 10 years. He's released 4 albums, 6 EPs, again, concert tours, you name it. And both SHINee and Taemin have won multiple awards and nominations and continue to do so. Taemin won 2 awards just earlier this year at the Asian Star Entertainment Awards. He won Best Solo Performer and Best Conceptual Artist. Excuse me. So I've put up this little quote from Taemin. I'm always thinking about what my identity is. And I think for a lot of people, this would be quite kind of a banal thing to say. So, okay, yeah, we've all thought about it, right? But for him, I think it's actually it's a deeper question. So as a member of a K-pop group, he was sort of given a role to play when SHINee debuted. He was the baby of the group. He still is the baby of the group, even though he's nearly 31. And he was given the role of, you know, little brother, squeaky clean, cute, innocent, that kind of thing. He was also, as SHINee became popular, he was also criticized and also objectified because he was considered to look very feminine. And so this was, you know, considered to be a bad thing. And when he finally became a solo artist, he actually confronted this head on with a song called Pretty Boy, which was all about, it was written by another member of Shiny for him. And it's all about how actually, yeah, you can be pretty, you can be sensitive and still be a man. And he's sort of leaned into it ever since, really. So that's one aspect of his identity that he deals with quite often. This second quote from him says, "I could have chosen a safer route and done music that's more popular in K-pop, but I wanted to expand its musical spectrum to stand out from the rest and create something that could bring out my identity more." So yeah, he could have followed along the sort of cookie cutter K-pop sort of standard thing, but actually he decided that, you know, he'd rather be an individual and do something different. And I think he's probably sacrificed a bit of popularity for that. He doesn't sell as much as other idols do, or some other idols do, but at the same time he's remained an individual, and as I say, he's, you know, he's a role model to many. Excuse me. So our first part of Gothic imagery, we've got disguise. As you can see in the picture here, he's wearing a mask, sort of covers his head, and you get a hint of his face, but it's quite blurred. You can't really make it out. And so a disguise like this, it reveals and conceals. So it hides his face, but it directs your attention elsewhere. So disguise foregrounds the interface between the inside and the outside, the unseen and the seen, or the self and the world. And it also foregrounds the idea of bodily boundaries, so where you begin and where you end. Transitional states, so are you one thing or are you the other? And this leads to epistemological uncertainty, obviously. Like, at what point would you say he's one thing, and at what point would you say he's a different thing? So the first section of disguise, we're going to have a look at masks. He wears masks a lot. And if not a mask over his entire face, then we get things like blindfolds and eye patches, all kinds of other stuff. And this little bit of scholarship from T. Castle talks about masks and the pleasure of the masquerade, which is attended on the experience of doubleness, the alienation of inner from outer, a fantasy of two bodies simultaneously and thrillingly present, self and other together, the two in one. So he's the person inside the mask, but he's also the person with the mask on. So you see the mask, you don't see what's inside it. So I've got a couple of clips of examples of his use of masks. The first one is in Advice, just a song from 2021. Let me just give you a couple of content warnings. So about 13 seconds in, there's a small section of flashing, so strobing. So please be careful if that disturbs you. And there's also sort of hints of a car accident in the background. So we'll have a look at this quickly, and then I'll talk a bit more about what you've seen afterwards. Okay, so in that clip, excuse me, in that clip we saw him in a mask that's a lot like a balaclava, I suppose, with sort of metallic or stitching over the top, like a spider's web, like a net of some kind. So that's covering his face. You can only see his eyes, but at the same time, he's not wearing a shirt. So immediately your eye is pulled away from the face and to the body. But at the same time as that, he's actually got paint on his body. So he is disguising his body. He's not just simply exposing it completely. Okay, let's move on. Oh, I'm sorry. Bing, bing, bing. Okay. Sorry, I should have given you a content warning for this. There is a snake in the cover image of the next slide. All right, so yeah, this clip includes snakes, but it also includes masks, we've got face covered by smoke, and we've also got him covering his own eyes with his hands. But there's also an interesting aspect of exposure here, like there was in the previous one, but done in a different way, this time with magnifying glasses. So let's have a look at this. All right, so we had there a clip where he had two different masks. As I said, he covered his eyes with his hands, and then that image was also in the background of him singing. And at the same time, he was sort of exposed and inviting exposure by sort of sitting on this couch with magnifying glasses and lenses being held up in front of him, sort of inviting people to look at him. So we've got this idea of masks revealing and hiding. Do you know what I mean? So he's saying, don't look at my face, look at this other thing. And what is the other thing? Well, it's him, but it's also his art, right? And you might be wondering, okay, wait, he's a K-pop idol. They have their face as their calling card. Why would you hide your face? Well, there must be another reason. And we know that Taemin always knows what he's doing. So in this case, with Want at least, he's inviting people to look, but keeping people at arm's length and saying, you know, you can't see everything. You can't see behind the mask. Another type of disguise that he uses are veils. So I found a couple of nice examples of veils in Gothic literature. So I'll read those through first. So the first is from Anne Radcliffe's Mysteries of Udolpho. And the passage goes, she paused again, and then with a timid hand lifted the veil, but instantly let it fall, perceiving that what it had concealed was no picture, and before she could leave the chamber, she dropped senseless on the floor. So there's an object hidden under the veil, and she's spent so much time trying to gather the courage to lift the veil away, and as soon as she sees what it is, she faints. We also have here an extract from Matthew Lewis's The Monk. Let me read that for you. It says, the voice came from a female, the delicacy and elegance of whose figure inspired the youths with the most lively curiosity to view the face to which it belonged. This satisfaction was denied them. The features were hidden by a thick veil. So here we've got this figure hidden behind a thick veil, and so the youths focus on the voice. They're forced to focus on something that's not this woman's appearance. So what do veils do in terms of the Gothic? Well, Catherine Spooner suggests this as a function. She says, veils evoke religious mysteries as well as discourses of female modesty and propriety. The expression to take the veil, meaning to take religious vows, encompasses both. The veil or shroud, traditionally worn by spectres, represents a barrier between the living and the dead, this world and the afterlife, and as such can represent spiritual, otherworldly, or forbidden knowledge. So Taemin's used veils in a couple of album shoots, and the picture to the lower right of this slide, the blue one, is from a performance of a song called I'm Crying, during which he pulls up this kind of extra bit of fabric attached to his shirt, pulls it over his head and his face, and performs the song standing still with his face and his head covered, while a circus of acrobats perform around him. So he's there, he's present, but he's removing himself by making himself invisible. So we have this idea of a barrier that the veil represents. I think it's worth noting that the key word maybe in this little passage that I've got on the screen here is female. Female modesty and propriety. Taemin's a man, and although he has sort of leaned quite hard into the sort of gender-free, as he describes it, aspects of his art, the veil is still a feminine thing. I think it would be easy to say, oh, he's not European. He doesn't know, and do him that disservice by saying, oh, well, he doesn't know what a veil means. Well, he's a practicing Catholic. He knows what veils are about. And so he's wearing a veil there. Is he hiding himself so that he can focus on the performance? Or is he hiding himself as a tease? And for disguises, there's also makeup. There's another quote here from him, and he's describing his experience of the first time he put on makeup when he was 12. And he said, it felt like I'm wearing a mask, not because it was uncomfortable, but because I look kind of cool, yet a bit unfamiliar at the same time. It felt like my attitude changed as my looks changed. Excuse me. But Taemin's not shy about using makeup. He will use it, as necessary for the performance. And here we see him sort of saying, yeah, I become a different person when I put that makeup on. And it works like a mask for him in that sense. All right, let's have a look at doubles. So Taemin's work is just packed with examples of doubling. There are so many, whether they are sort of brief images in music videos or sort of actually narrative devices within the videos themselves. I've illustrated this slide with with the publicity poster for his album Press It, in which he appears twice, on the left as sort of perhaps more grown up, dressed in red, leaning down towards his other self, who's more innocent looking, wearing white. The one in white seems to be kind of mesmerized by the one in red, and they lean together to kiss. So doubles are a common thing in Gothic literature, and actually one of my favorite things. I really love a double. So I've got here a couple of examples. The first one is from Edgar Allan Poe's William Wilson. And right at the end of the short story, William Wilson looks into a mirror and kills himself. And he says to the image in the mirror, "You have conquered and I yield, yet henceforward art thou also dead, dead to the world and its hopes. In me didst thou exist, and in my death, see by this image, which is thine own, how utterly thou hast murdered thyself." So we have here an antagonistic double that has to be got rid of by getting rid of the original. The second example I've got here is from the Private Memoirs and Confessions of a Justified Sinner by James Hogg. This is one of my favourite books, and it's a Romancing the Gothic favourite as well, so I couldn't not put it in. the main character, Robert, meets a man called Gil Martin, who bears a striking resemblance to himself and appears to be able to make himself resemble Robert even more, and begins to take over from Robert in sort of various activities, discharging his duties, and also encouraging him to commit increasingly appalling crimes. During the book, Gil Martin actually says this to Robert. He says, "I'm wedded to you so closely that I feel as if I were the same person. Our essences are one, our bodies and spirits being united, so that I am drawn towards you as by magnetism. And wherever you are, there must my presence be with you." So again, we have an inescapable, excuse me, an inescapable double who is, let's face it, quite menacing there. So what are doubles about? What's their function within Gothic literature? Well, Andrew Weber has suggested this, that the duplication points up an essential lack which must be supplemented, a lack within the real self, and by extension within the order of the real. The subjective spook at once threatens and underpins the objective claims of realism. It has something of the effect of a photographic negative. So you have the double fulfilling parts of the original that the original cannot fulfill itself. You need both of them for completeness. And I've picked here two pictures from the next clip that we're going to see. On the left, you can see Taemin in white against a white background. The soft focus, he looks quite angelic, contrasted against the figure on the right. So black background, black clothes. He's got talons, he's got pointed ears. He's looking through his fringe, which actually makes it hard to see that he's got makeup across his face. It's like a prosthetic. Sort of within the fandom, we've started calling this character Taemin. But he's sort of this alter ego, if you like. And he appears in the next video clip. So this is a performance video from last year. The song's called The Risness, which, for my money, is probably one of the worst song titles ever, but we'll let him off. So we see here then we have the two characters, the white and the dark Taemin. He switches back and forth between the two. It's seamless. You know, he walks across the room or runs across the room and switches between one and the other. And it's quite easy to believe that, oh, okay, this is one person. This is simply a change of clothes. But then at one point during the video, they interact. So let me show it to you, see if you can spot it. Okay, so we saw him sort of switching back and forth, running behind pillars and coming out the other side as the other character. And then at one point during the dance break, white Taemin mimes shooting black Taemin, who falls down and then quite spookily gets back up again and moves towards the camera. So we've got here the idea that he wants to get rid of the dark version, that he's willing to shoot him, but that he can't. He's always going to keep coming back. I will say that The Risness might be the worst song title in the world, but this performance does include one of the best dance moves ever, which has got to be the sexy velociraptor. So again, we'll let him off. My second example of doubling today is this clip from a song called Just Me and You. This is a special video that he released after he'd gone off to the military to do his compulsory military service. And this appeared sort of without context, really. So there was no publicity around it. There was no promotion. It just appeared. And in this case, we've got, rather than an antagonistic double, we've actually got a cooperative double. And I think this is a really nice example of a double that completes, that without the figure in black, he wouldn't be able to complete the performance. I'll show you this now. All right, so in that clip, you could see that this double was very much a cooperative figure. It literally supported him in places. And although we didn't have time for the whole video, I have added some extra screenshots here so you can see a bit more of what was going on. We have sections where he appears to be fighting with the black-clad figure. This dancer in black, you know, he looks a bit like a bunraku puppeteer, you know, Japanese puppeteers who perform against a black background, well, with black clothes, so they're invisible behind their puppets. So he's fighting with this other self, but at the same time, the self leads him in the dance. So on the right-hand side, we have the black-clad figure spinning him round. We also have at the bottom the figure holding him up so that he can make this beautiful shape against the wall. And then at one point during the video, the figure disappears and we have Taemin running towards his own shadow. Is he looking for that figure again? Does he want it to come back? Maybe. So my third aspect of Gothic imagery that I'm using to talk about Taemin today is transformation. So transformation is about change, it's about evolution, it's blurring boundaries, so moving from one state to another, blurring fantasy and reality. It's about alienation and estrangement. So, I mean, thinking about, for example, Kafka's Metamorphosis, the metamorphosis into the beetle is symbolic of alienation. It's also, transformation is also about vulnerability. So you imagine a butterfly. A caterpillar becomes a chrysalis, and in that state, it's vulnerable while it becomes the butterfly. So this blurring of boundaries, the blurring of fantasy and reality, it kind of overlaps, doesn't it, with the doubles, with the masks and the veils, moving from one state to another. And I wanted to illustrate this with two performances of the same song. So time doesn't allow us to have both videos as a whole, but they are on the Eventbrite page. There's a playlist on there. So this is the sort of original performance of this song Door. And it begins, so top left, and moves clockwise around the screen to the bottom left. And he begins the song blindfolded. He also has a piece of cloth across his mouth, and he's tied to the stage by a series of white sort of elastic strips or ribbons. And throughout the song, he kind of fights and struggles against this. And as the song moves on, his blindfold is removed, and one by one, the bonds are also released. And at the end of the song, he can see, he can speak, and he's free to move. And this, for me anyway, this performance, it really puts me in mind of Frankenstein's creature. you know, in old movies when, you know, it's alive and you see the creature for the first time with the electricity running through it. And it's always swathed in bandages. And then, you know, it sits up and stands and walks, and the bandages come away, and the creature is revealed. And this makes me think a lot of that. So Taemin reinterpreted this song for his most recent concert series. There's no sort of official video of this, so I've had to borrow from people's fan cams. But there's the version of this on the playlist is what I'm using here. Again, we're starting at the top left, and it's hard to see from the light, but actually he's suspended by his feet from the ceiling. He's upside down. So the song begins and the screen opens and he's revealed to be hanging upside down, singing as you do. And then as the song moves on, he's brought upright, as you can see on the right-hand side there. He releases himself from the harness and steps down and takes off his blindfold. And as the song moves into the following song, we have this image at the bottom of a pair of wings projected behind him. So maybe the part at the beginning of the song where he's hanging upside down, maybe that's a chrysalis. And by the end of the song, he's become this winged beast, whatever that is. And we can't really talk about Taemin's recent concert series and album without talking about Hermann Hesse's Damien. Taemin's been sort of flagging this for quite a long time now, and his Instagram account has part of this quotation actually on it. So he's been sort of waving this at us for a while now. The idea of transformation here is a bird in the egg and then fights its way out. So the quote from Damien is, it's in the book as a note that Sinclair finds in his pocket that he discovers is from Damien, even though it looks like it's from one of his classmates. The quotation says, "The bird fights its way out of the egg. The egg is the world. Who would be born must first destroy a world. The bird flies to God. That God's name is Abraxas." So the transformation of the egg to the bird, and then the bird flying to this Abraxas. Abraxas is actually explicitly represented in this last video clip that I'm going to show you. This is the video for Guilty, which is the title track of his album from last year. It's a complicated video in the sense that there's an awful lot going on, and if you have, like, the more context you have, the more understandable it is, but the more upsetting it gets. So let's not give you too much context, and we'll have a look at this little clip. There's a content warning here for institutional abuse. So we're going to see Taemin as a man who is trapped in some kind of institution. We're going to see him being manhandled and pushed around. And then in the second verse, we have the transformation into Abraxas. And we know it's Abraxas because the director named the character as such. And Abraxas from Damien is a god who is neither good nor bad, neither male nor female. Abraxas is everything, but it can't be defined. And so let's have a look at how Taemin actually represents Abraxas here with this clip. Okay, so we saw there Taemin becoming this this figure in the feathered headdress representing the bird that's fought its way out of the egg, and dressed in, well, it's a skirt. He wears a lot of skirts. So this kind of androgynous being that has become sort of the figurehead for everybody else in the institution, and presumably leads them off to freedom. And I can't really talk about Taemin and transformation without noting that his most recent concert series was titled Metamorph. As I said, he knows what he's doing. So we're getting towards the end now. I've got one final quote from him. He says, a lot of my songs carry words that could be considered negative. And although positive words have power, I think it's more attractive to make the negative look beautiful. Isn't that just really, really goth? So this pushing boundaries, turning things around, transforming from one to another. The last bit of scholarship that I've got here is from a piece on the Victorian Gothic in A Guide to the Gothic. And this is talking about the function of Gothic literature during the Victorian period. And I think a lot of it actually works for what Taemin does. So the extract says, these texts were controversial as they often scrutinized and critiqued social and cultural structures of the period and simultaneously sensationalized them with romantic notions, sexual depravity, immorality, and grotesque, monstrous forms. And I've chosen to illustrate this slide with the photo on the left here. This is from a television performance of Guilty from the end of last year, where Taemin rocks up to perform Guilty with its, frankly, sexy bit of dancing, but he's doing it in a school uniform. Yeah, that made a lot of people very uncomfortable, which was the point. And so we come to our conclusion. So what does all of this tell us about Taemin and his, the way that he's trying to express his identity to us and what that identity is? So I've picked 3 keywords here. First of all, we have duality. Obviously, duality as symbolized by masks, veils, disguises of all kinds. We've got the doubling, and we have the transformation from one thing to another thing. We have subversion, where he's leaning into things that perhaps make people uncomfortable, but but he's also twisting some of the imagery as well. So, for example, in the doubling, where there's one in the risness that is most definitely a combative double, but then we have a cooperative one. So he's not kind of a one-trick pony in terms of the way he uses the doubles. And then I've also included the word fluidity, because I think it describes the way that he moves. So obviously his dance moves, his choreography is very fluid. It also describes the way he shifts from one thing to another. That's also very fluid. And it also expresses the gender thing, where he's quite happy presenting as a man and identifying as a man, but at the same time saying, gender doesn't really matter when it comes to my art. And as you can see on the left-hand side there, he's quite happy turning up for a photo shoot and looking very feminine, because it's still him. And there we are. There's the end. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And thanks to Sam, Maddie, Sean, and Melissa for your help. Are there any questions? I've just got a quick page of references while you're thinking of your questions. Thank you, everyone.